In this video, we're going to be correlating brain parts to comic book characters. The thalamus is the brain's central relay station, and it's just on top of the brainstem. Nearly all the messages going into or out of the brain go through the thalamus. Hawkeye is part of a super secret spy organization called S.H.I.E.L.D. S.H.I.E.L.D. agents are required to gather information and relay that information to their chief and commander. Both Hawkeye and the thalamus relay messages. The cerebral cortex is a thin gray matter covering of the cerebral hemispheres. It covers major portion of mental processing and thinking. The spinal cord is the body's central nervous system. It's the pathway for messages sent by brain to body and from body to brain. Nick Fury can be represented as both of these brain functions. Since he is the leader of S.H.I.E.L.D., he essentially is the one who processes the different information that is gathered from everybody else. And also, he is the one that receives information from people like Hawkeye, who relay the different messages through the spinal cord, which ultimately lead to the cerebral cortex, leading to Nick Fury. The reticular formation is a pencil-shaped structure forming the core of the brainstem. It arouses the cortex to keep the brain alert. This brain part can be related to Spider-Man since he has a thing called the spider sense, which basically alerts him to different dangers of enemies around him. The hippocampus is a component of the limbic system, which is involved in establishing long-term memories. This big four-headed dude is called the Watcher. Now, the Watcher is an ancient being that essentially records different events that happens in the universe. Now, this can be related to the hippocampus because both involve long-term memories. The temporal lobe acts as the auditory cortex receptive language. It understands language and has to do with hearing. The parietal lobe receives sensory input for touch and body position. This character named Daredevil was blinded as a child by a chemical accident, but these chemicals actually enhanced his other senses, which include touch, hearing, smelling, and taste. He can represent both of these functions since his other senses are so enhanced. Pituitary gland. The pituitary gland is the endocrine system's most influential gland. Under the influence of hypothalamus, the pituitary gland regulates growth and controls other endocrine glands. Ant-Man is a character that can regulate his size and growth from a thing called Pym particles. He can essentially become huge or very tiny at any given moment of time, which can relate to the pituitary gland since they both relate to growth. The hypothalamus is a limbic structure that constantly monitors the brain's blood to determine the condition of the body. It also controls body temperature, appetite, and metabolism. Although it may not completely correlate, the Human Torch can regulate his body temperature by combusting into flames, which connects as the hypothalamus's function to regulate body temperature. The somatosensory cortex is a strip of the parietal lobe lying just behind the central fissure, and it's involved with sensations of touch. It's also kind of related to the parietal lobe. It relates to this character named Absorbing Man because anything this character touches can essentially absorb and turn his skin into that same environment he touches. Both of these relate to each other because they both involve touch. The frontal lobe is the part of the brain that controls important cognitive skills in humans such as emotional expression, problem solving, language, judgment, and sexual behaviors. In essence, it is the control panel of our personality and our ability to communicate. Now, the frontal lobe relates to this character named Psychopirate because this character is actually able to project emotions into people. So if he wants you to feel angry, he could honestly just project those same emotions into you, which is why it relates to the frontal lobe since they both have to deal with emotion. The cerebellum is responsible for a number of functions including motor skills such as balance, coordination, and posture, while the pons contain centers for the control of vital processes including respiration and cardiovascular functions, and it's also involved in the coordination of eye movements and balance. Both of these functions relate to this character named Nightwing, who was originally the first sidekick of Batman, Robin. He was an acrobat, so since he was an acrobat, that requires a lot of balance and coordination, something he is very good at and relates to the cerebellum and pons. The occipital lobe is essentially the main area where the brain receives visual information from the opposite fields. Now, this can relate to Superman since besides his super strength and flying, he actually has X-ray vision. So both of these involve the use of visual information. The motor cortex controls voluntary movements at the back of the frontal lobe, while the medulla oblongata controls heartbeat and breathing. Both of these terms can be related to Flash, since he is known for running, both of which is known for movement, and movement causes heartbeat and breathing, especially excessive and fast movement. The corpus callosum is the communication link between the left and right cerebral hemispheres. This relates to this character named Firestorm because there are actually two minds inside one body, and they both communicate with one another with the Firestorm matrix. Both these characters and terms relate to each other because they communicate with two different minds/hemispheres. The amygdala is a limbic system structure involved in memory and emotion, and its particular fear and aggression. This relates to Batman since his whole life is shaped by fear and aggression ever since the death of his parents, and he embraces that fear and aggression in order to shape it good for Gotham City.